Welcome to Mixed Mental Arts Chat number 3. This one is going to be a focused ideation session, focusing on the path to Ikigai in the trades. First of all, Hunter, I guess, if you would, and then we'll have John and Derek chime in as well. Just for those not familiar with the term, what is Ikigai?
Well, Ikigai is a Japanese term for your reason for living or your purpose, raison d'être in French. But the nice thing is, and literally just to give some context, I hadn't heard this term until probably about 3 weeks ago when this amazing innovation expert, I wish we could get him on the podcast Adam Hansen introduced me to it. Because a lot of what we've been talking about in the context of the Middle East is that the real solution to terrorism is providing a path to dignity. You can't simply criticize a bad idea endlessly. You have to provide a better idea. And Adam refined that and said, well, I think, maybe that what you're talking about is Ikigai. And Ikigai has these 4 circles. I'm good at it. The world needs it. I enjoy it. And I get paid for it. And when Jenny says that's really what every parent wants for their kid, that's how we're all trying to figure out how to get those 4 circles to line up. And part of what I think we'll talk about today is the fact that we've all been sort of indoctrinated in America that the way that you make those 4 circles line up is to go to college and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a magic piece of paper that somehow is going to allow you to align those 4 circles, but often does a very terrible job of helping you do that.
Well, yeah, and even then, it might be aspirational, because I think too many people just kind of trade off the I enjoy doing it for off-hours stuff. And they say, look, I'm good enough at what I do. It doesn't particularly float my boat, but I can make good money at it, and the world seems to need it maybe enough. And so we just want to make sure that people are kind of aware and kind of critical of unnecessary trade-offs, and that really the path toward greater happiness, fulfillment, and value to the world, to your employer, to everyone, is to find that space where these 4 circles overlap, and that truly is Ikigai. John, what if anything would you add to that? Is that a pretty good summation of Ikigai for you?
I mean, when I did the podcast with Brian and Hunter sent that to me a few days before that. I looked at it. It's brilliant. The Japanese culture, I mean, in stone, in wood, they have in their concept of wabi-sabi, which is they nail it left and right so many times. So when I saw that, you can't enhance on it. You can't. You can't expound upon it. It's probably was developed thousands of years ago. So, I look at that and I can answer. And I did that in the podcast. It's like I've got all those. It's not like I've achieved them to this high level. I'm in that what I call like I've actually experienced that. And so it's I see that when you're in that thing, you're in that mode. It is completely badass. It really is. And I feel like super lucky, and I also feel like I'm at the beginning of what that will look like.
That's great. And it really is all about the path. And then once you're on the path, just how do you keep strengthening all of it and never really get complacent? You keep searching, seeking, and working on it.
You definitely get so amped by it, you want other people to get on it too.
Absolutely. Derek, what would you add to this?
I think you guys hit all the high points, but I think we're at the threshold of an incredible opportunity to really kind of help communities help themselves. I know Elon Musk just unveiled a truck that's going to be driving itself here on Thursday night, but we have an infrastructure crisis coming up. We have people that are going to need this stuff built here in Detroit. As you can see, I'm a proud Detroit representative. We need to really try and help develop the next generation of tradesmen. And I think with this group of folks on this call right now in the MMA community, we have opportunity to help people gain the necessary skills to not only become a tradesman, but there's some very basic things in Detroit that we lacked as far as getting some folks to have the reading and comprehension capabilities that Hunter and some of the other folks on this call are experts in, to help build up to point where we can get them into the trades and help change their the fortune of their lives and their community's lives. So.
It's great to have all these wonderful, innovative ideas, but then if you can't actually scale them and make them happen in the real world, be able to build things that rely on the skilled trades, then things just kind of come to a standstill. So it all ties together. And the idea that innovation is only the purview of certain geniuses in Silicon Valley. It gets back to the now discredited genius myth and all those things that we've been discussing in mixed mental arts. I'm going to say that some examples of success. I think what John is doing, I'll just kind of comment on what he's got going on and building out a whole ecosystem about bringing in the right people. Having apprenticeships to get them up to speed. Really, it's not just your technology, John, that is, centuries old, but it's also just the understanding of how you onboard people. Couple that with, I know, John, you're a pretty, omnivorous reader, and you adapt some of the best thinking about, how we think, what's coming out of science that is applicable here. And so pulling that all together, I think we could do much worse than to look at what John is doing with Heritage and with the Thrustone group. And so this is kind of, there's a great model there. So let's see if we can create more of that.
Can I tell you real quick in about 2 minutes how the model worked?
Yeah.
So the way I see it is what I realized in 2016, I was doing this project in Durango, Colorado, was the classes, we have a new ultra rich class. We have class stratification, middle classes disappearing. Okay, that's something I'm not, I can't control that. But you have what I call the ultra wealthy, the elites. And what happens is, in my mind, I started thinking about, they have all this excess income that their accountants are telling them to invest in hard assets. Hard assets generally are houses. My current client has 5 houses. And they have to buy property and houses, etc. So I just started looking at what does it take to work at that level. And I was hitting one thing. All my projects are stone centric. They revolve around stone. That's the skeleton of the project. Well, I'm like, what if we can expand and do everything on one site, but bring it to a highest level possible, where we're bringing the craftsman closer to the client. Get rid of all the middle bullshit. The markups, the general contractors, the subs. And new models. So what I did is I put this group together. We landed this first project. I brought the whole concept to the client, and he said, okay, here's your starting budget. It was a 7-figure budget. And he goes, give me your best ideas. He had so much money that he just basically said, give me your best ideas, bring them to the table. So I asked all 5 members, blacksmiths, sculptors, woodworker, lighting, and my stone import guy. I said, bring me your best ideas. He went for everything. The budget increased by 400%. So,
great.
Well, what's interesting is on this project, every craftsman everybody in it is doing something they've never done before. So we're pushing our boundaries. But my estimation is we've developed a microeconomy by collaborating. If I had gone in without my fellow craftsmen, I would just do something and that's it. And then there wouldn't be this high level. We're doing stuff that's never been done before, like, bronze works and new types of sculptures with hidden lighting, etc. By my estimation, there's 35 guys on site, 13 companies. And then when you add spouses and wives, there's about 65 people benefiting off this guy's surplus income that he only spent because we brought capacity to him.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, capacity.
So the principle I want to extract here, John, is the idea of non-zero based thinking. And now, so as we get into the trades, challenging some of those assumptions that, an old assumption might be, hey, you either go to work in something innovative or you go into the trades. And I know that, there are other options, but the idea that somehow a profession in skilled trade can't be innovative, you've totally busted that here. And you've shown that that's a very powerful way forward. And it can make, again, for this meaningful life, and it's, tying together all the parts of Ikigai. Skilled trades in 2025, I just picked a future date, are different than they were in the 80s in the following 3 ways: A, B, and C. If we can start playing with up front already this vision of how that's going to be different and how this route now really can be a credible path toward Ikigai, then I think that's a really great way of laying out that skilled trades now aren't what they were to your dad's generation.
Skilled trades in 2025 are different than they were in the 80s, because now it's not about getting your pension. It's about having, for young people, the guys I work with, the young 24-year-olds, they've got to have a sense of purpose or they lose their motto. It has to be a bigger purpose.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And you attach the purpose to what they're the action, and you attach money to that, they'll stay with you.
Well, we're going with Ikigai. Derek, what's an idea that you have?
So, I mean, this is not necessarily an idea, thought, I guess, but I mentioned this in some of our documents. Long story short, there's been a lot of money thrown at this problem. I mean, Michigan alone, I can tell you of tens of millions of dollars in the past 6 months been thrown at trying to get people trained to do this. And it's that connectivity to try and whether it's eliminate the stigma, whether it's eliminate, the barriers to get the folks to, the point where they can, barrier that John has referenced in the past. Like, okay, can you learn the basics as far as the construction side of the house, but some people need to learn how to read and write. And somehow I think we can collectively figure out a way to connect those two to help them become the glue. Something's missing. Let's figure out the glue, more or less.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Let me add to that real quick, because I got a lot to say about this, but I won't jump in all the time. So skilled trades of 2025 are different because we did something in 2018 where we started thinking about young people, investing in young people, and holding a long view about what their potential is, investing in them. And that's what no one's doing in the trades. Everybody's got a short view. They look at how expendable they are. They hire these guys, pay them shit money, and then work them doggedly, and then that's it. And we've got to invest in them and hold the long view on them.
I want to pull together, and I can lead this, but I'd love your input. If we could start assembling an old way, new way list. This is what skilled trades were. These, it's like that great Rolling Stone ad of the 80s that had, perception, reality. And the perception of the Rolling Stone reader at that point was still, stoned hippie. And the reality that they showed was, no, our readership are very, very with it. They're very upwardly mobile. They're actually managers. They're making stuff happen in the world. So let's, just a note, we'll start pulling together the old way, new way of thinking about the skilled trades. I want to turn just quickly to Jeremiah and have you, if you would, introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in being here.
Well, for starters, I'm in the skilled trades, so
what's your trade?
I'm a journeyman lineman. I work on the power lines.
Oh, fantastic!
But I'm also a union member, so it's kind of different for like union versus non-union, especially in the skilled trades, because in the union side, we can just go to any different union hall that we want and sign up at the union hall and be put to work. So it's very beneficial as far as that side of the union. Like for me, especially, like my wife's in the Navy. I moved to Washington, D.C. I went to the union hall, signed the books is what we call it. And I was working a week later.
In 1980, the trades were something you avoided because you had to get your hands dirty. In 2025, the trades are something you join because you get to get your hands dirty. I think one of the big problems one of the big problems of knowledge work is that, if you talk to people who have those jobs we're all supposed to want in computer programming, They like, I mean, Dustin can speak to this. You know, he talks about like working at a major video game designer, and you're like working in Call of Duty, and that's supposed to be cool. But in practice, you're such a cog in the machine that you have no idea what you've contributed, and you have no sense of the real value that you've contributed. John and his apprentices, at the end of the day, they can see what they've done. And so I think that it offers not just, you know, something that is jobocalypse resistance in terms of Ikigai, but it offers potentially a greater sense of personal satisfaction that you've really done something in the real world.
What would be our equivalent of land, air, and sea maneuvers in a communications campaign? Or it could be the best political campaigns from history. Anything you know about any of them, you know, like what Obama was able to, whether you liked him or not, what he was able to accomplish in his first campaign in terms of getting funding from, you know, millions of people that otherwise, you know, hadn't contributed. And so he was just less, ostensibly the story goes, he was less beholden to, you know, just the super funders. That's interesting. What can we learn from that? Or what's anything you can learn from breakthrough advertising? Just thinking of other types of campaigns, be they military, political, or commercial. Think for a moment, what makes that an interesting campaign, a breakthrough campaign? What could we extract from it in terms of a principle or principles, and then apply it to what we're doing here? I'll give you just one more, just a further flesh out on my idea of the military one. So from the military, you have air assault to soften the target for the ground game, right? You take out certain, I'm making this up because I've never been in the military, but my understanding is air assault to soften the target for the ground game. That leads me to think of a focused short-term social media attack through priority channels to raise awareness. And then we start making the ground game more those of us who are in the community, those of us in MMA who are actually physically in the area, to go in and start making the longer form direct message to try to make that message just more absorbable by the local target audience. That was one idea just coming from military. There are several other ideas you can pull together just from military. So John, what's one metaphor for a campaign?
The efficacy of fake news from Russia and Montenegro. I mean, fake news saturated and dominated, and still does. So how did they do it? I mean,
yeah.
I've read some exposés on how they do it. They do it out of Montenegro and Russia. It's actually a moneymaker. And so, I mean, fake news.
I love it. Yeah. So what can we learn from that? I think that's fantastic.
Something about how they saturated, and it had to do with language. I mean, Hunter can expound on that. It's language, word choice, and to me, there's so much about how we use language to trigger new perceptions. Because right now we're fighting this '80s mentality that he talked about. So
yeah.
we have. I think it has to be really cognizant. I do this very carefully in my business, and I actually, when I changed from dry stone mason to stonesmith, thanks to my lighting guy, it shifted me internally. I never got asked the stupid questions anymore. All the questions were new, and it actually triggered a whole new conversation with everybody. And then the other thing I did in terms of such watching my language is I let everyone know I'm a craftsman, I'm not a contractor, because contractors are generally considered untrustworthy. Craftsmen have a different level of trust. Yeah. So I think a lot of this is about language, and fake news triggered the amygdala or something, fear.
I like that. So the principle here is how to get past the white noise of kind of system one thinking. If you're using the very same language that has always been used to talk about this, you've already lost the first opportunity to stop them in their tracks and hold them for a moment to consider what you're talking about. That is excellent. Thank you, sir.
So an example would be something like the Marshall Plan. You have a situation in which, as you described before, an assault squad basically broke open and defeated the resistance, right? Something that prevented a goal from going forward. And then you had the wherewithal to make a plan afterwards and implement certain steps to meet these strategic goals, right? So to put that into the within the confines of trades or Ikigai writ large, it's basically doing the work and then following through, you know?
Love it. Marshall Plan.
I'm going to steal from Scott Atran, who I was emailing with, and he's been comparing ISIS and the alt-right, and just the ways in which they're in common. And I asked him, we're trying to like beat them at their own game, and I asked him, what's the secret to what they do? And he said, peer-to-peer engagement, intimate and sustained, is the key.
Yeah.
So that sounds a lot to me like apprenticeship. What Jenny was talking about, how humans learn. And I think what we're really trying to do is win converts. And so, I like religious metaphors, not because I'm religious, but because they suggest a level of undying commitment to the cause, where you know that ultimately the counterinsurgency is won by winning converts wherever you are, one by one, until you have become such an undeniable force that everybody has to engage with you. So I think it's missionary work, and I think that we should all be fishers of craftsmen.
Fishers of craftsmen. Look what he did there.
Yeah.
Hunter, you know all this language too well.
So I will.
All right.
I will add my. It's not really a metaphor at this point, but I call it.
Go for it, Derek.
We have the Marshall Plan. I'm gonna call it the Bieber/Uber plan. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we really need to try and connect some folks here. We need to get the social grassroots campaign. I mean, Uber and Airbnb uprooted everything. If we can develop a mechanism to help folks get connected, there's plenty of charities. I work a lot with United Way and some other folks around here that have there's a lot of funding there. We got to figure out a mechanism to get people connected to the next step. And it's kind of, I think, more of a grassroots. I mean, all this talk about, the apprenticeships are great, but we got to get people to them and there's access to them. Their apprenticeships are already available. They're already out there. So I think there's prior step we had to focus on. So I call it kind of the social media campaign, for lack of a better term. So
that's great. Very good. All right, who's got another one? Anyone?
Well, playing off what Derek said, and Hunter's totally right, because we've been doing that with my group. But the force multiplier effect, it's more of a military term. It's not a campaign. I guess it could be. And that's just where we talked about that before. That's where you bring in a small little, it's like bringing a SEAL team into an Army brigade, which they did in Ramadi, with Jocko Willink. So you're bringing in a highly skilled, trained group of guys that operate, they're tier 1 operators working with an Army brigade, and they're a force multiplier. So you don't have to bring in another Army brigade. You're bringing a small group with incredibly sharp skills, and they're augmenting, but they're creating a force multiplier effect. And there's three. I know there's a bunch of things we can do for force multiplier effects with this. And
well, just to kind of add on to what Derek had to say, is I've dealt with talking with people in the cities and in the streets, asking about how do I get into your job? How do I get into your career? And I explained to them, essentially, you need a Class A CDL driver's license, and then call me. And just even trying to get people to take that very first initiative is difficult. And that's like what Derek was getting at, as far as building that social media campaign to where we can help them break through to where they can get into these trades would be ideal.
Well, I'm hearing a lot about those earliest steps. How do you reframe it so that they think differently about even the first one step that you could take to start really considering this, looking at it, taken it seriously, kind of what's that moment of truth? You know, we talk about in marketing. Yes, I'm sorry to bring up the M word, and I will wash my mouth out a little bit later. But we talk about the zero moment of truth, which is when you're finally at that point where you can pick the product off the shelf or not. And so now they've been exposed to this. I mean, anyone thinking about this has probably heard that, yeah, the apprenticeships are available, whatever that first step is. What's still that resistance?
I just wanted to throw in moths to a flame. I think in general, there's so often such a focus on what we don't have, right?
Yeah.
And like, oh, if only we had, you know, $10 million and a marketing team and a this and a that. And, you know, so much of the experience of mixed martial arts is that we've just kept doing whatever we can do. And the more that we do whatever we can do using the tools available, people see that, want to come in, want to help, want to get more involved. So I think that whatever we come up with, and, you know, obviously like some of the conversation that, you know, Derek, Adam, and John and I had is like, you know, what can we be doing in the meantime in terms of, you know, we've got the belt system to help people get on board with the core values. Can we use, you know, can we be making materials to help people learn the various parts of the trade? And then if the issue is getting people a CDL driver's license, then, you know, what do we need to do in order to do that? Can we be like starting to get people going out into those sort of communities that Derek is talking about and be like a buddy system, right? Where you essentially have like multi-level marketing where it's like, okay, we get, you know, Derek and Jeremiah, and they go in and they find the 5 most engaged people, and then they're going to help them get their CDL driver's license and get onto the path of the trades. But then it's their job to each flip 5 people. And if you have that sort of force multiplier, because it seems to me that a lot of this is obviously emotional, social, and psychological, and that you need somebody who's there who's going to be like hold you by the hand and really like take you through those first steps until you have enough confidence to really get on the way. It's sort of like AA, like you need a sponsor. And anyway, that's my thought.
We learn what we can from multi-level marketing, and we start to create downlines for people. we start getting people to think about who else they can bring in, and actually start kind of building out a peer mentor organization. And you get that, and that's just it. So at each level, if each person could get 2 people, you know, going on it, then you have a really interesting thing. And I think, you know, you give them fancy titles like Diamond or Platinum or, you know,
oh yeah,
Californium. And
who doesn't love a good pyramid scheme? I love it.
There we go. I think we start going for
a pyramid.
It will be huge.
It'll be huge in
Utah. A pyramid scheme for the trades, exactly, and it will be massive in Utah.
If I could touch on what Hunter said, though, as far as going out and getting these people and talking to them, how do we distinguish between a person's own initiative to actually go out and do something for themselves? I
don't know, but I mean, that's one way to do it, is to try it and see what happens. And so you're absolutely right. So what I'd like to do, Jeremiah, is turn that into a kind of a problem statement, how to find people who already, through something they've done, something we know about them, would be more likely to be motivated to take action. You start there first, and you know, motivation is relative. It's situational. As other people then start seeing other people hop on board and taking action, and that it's really improving their lives, you know, pretty directly and pretty quickly, motivation changes. So you're absolutely right. I think it really speaks to targeting. What can we learn about our initial target audience for this? And let's not try to motivate those who just aren't maybe self-starters.
I guess that's where I was trying to get to is how can we help ourselves to move this method forward to help find those people that are more self-motivated versus not, and do those types of things to where we're just not constantly going out and wasting our time, essentially.
Right. So it's asking what's true. I mean, just from your own experience, everyone thinking about this, within this context, the trades, what's true of those people who have shown that they're more motivated, that they are better self-starters, et cetera, et cetera. And the more we can get some kind of perspective on that, then that gives us a real focus. Once we have that focus on who, this is now the opportunity for me to bring this up. These help us so much, folks. The journalist questions, who, what, when, where, why, how. And you start to see the interconnection, the relationship between these. As we think about a different who, we think about what's true about them, what's distinctly true about them, and we just get a better vision of where we're trying to aim. Then, once we have that in place, then we can think about the what in our message, how, and the how of our message, and the why and the when and the where of our message.
What I do is I really like, every once in a while I went out of 12 guys that came on to my program this year, 4 made it because I have really high standards because I'm in a real world opportunity. So what I found is there is this inertia thing that Jeremiah's talking about. It's tough. Get these guys going to. The only thing I found that worked is when these guys responded to my Instagram, Facebook posting for an opportunity, I did a phone call with them. I asked them to send an email, how to be unique, make them desirable. I got on the phone with them. I tried to connect with them. If I wanted them, I gave them a next step. So I gave them accountability, right? So we went from, the inertia was them making a effort through how I posted my opportunity. And then I went into calling them because I wanted to assess them. And then it becomes kind of this teacher-student thing. And then from there, they came on. I gave them 2-week assessments. Each guy got 2 weeks. To prove himself. 8 didn't make it because I can't lower my standards for this right now. And I create a lot. I had some problems with my.
Yeah, you know what I like as you're talking, John. It's really making me think of the of the supplicant hanging out at the door of the Zendo to try to get admission, and you make it this thing to aspire to, and you just kind of blew past quickly the notion that you're putting up stuff on Instagram and everything. But you find the media that they're most engaged with. And oh, by the way, visuals, we know the connection between visuals and emotional power. Yep. And so just even there, right there, by making it a largely visual effort, that was very adept. Because now you're speaking to the elephant, not the rider, as much, right?
Two things that worked really well is I had a real live opportunity with real money. Like I offered a 12-week program, and then if someone wanted to stay beyond 12 weeks, they could. It was till the end of the project, which ended up being 6 months.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So then what I found though is I found young men with families who are newly married in their early 20s have a lot more impetus because they have families. So I found more success with those guys. And then what happened is, like my second-year guy who's been with me for 2 projects, now I just texted him the other day. I offered to invest in his next level learning this year to get his next level stone certification course.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I told him, you invested in me, I'm going to invest in you. And so now what I'm trying to do is really invest in them personally and stay in touch with them and keep them focused on a real world pain project that they can attach to, which helps them get through inertia.
Can I build off of that?
Please.
Because I think that, in terms of Derek is saying there are all these apprenticeship programs that people aren't using. But I mean, this may be a place to bring in Kahneman and Tversky and prospect theory, right? We know that how you frame the situation makes a huge, huge difference in people's psychology. So if you have a situation where you say there's this surgery, there's a 99% chance you'll survive, people are much more likely to take it than if you say there's a surgery and there's a 1% chance you'll die. So
Yeah.
I wonder, maybe those apprenticeships, if you hooked those apprenticeships up to very specific job opportunities, so that if you had, hey, there's an apprenticeship, and then sort of nebulously somehow that would lead to a job, even if there's like such a surplus of jobs that it would lead to it. But if you reframe those jobs in Detroit and you said, hey, there is a job with this specific company, and it can just be the first job of many, right, waiting for you if you first go through this 12-week apprenticeship program or something like that. So rather than offering apprenticeships, maybe it's offering jobs, and like maybe it's about connecting those dots between all of those apprenticeships and the actual construction jobs. Does that make sense?
I like it. And overall, what I'm seeing in that approach is with John's, again, his pictures on Instagram, making it really tangible, not this kind of dry abstraction, but then tying it to a very specific opportunity with a finite period with the option to move on then if you want to. But it's so concrete. It's so understandable. And I think that's really helpful. And it goes with, what we know from the science.
I love the idea of finding these kind of type A go-getters, but I think the opportunity that is being missed lies within how do we access the untapped. I know I sound like a broken record here, but I mean, there's all these folks that did not graduate from high school or even get to high school, and there's the opportunity to teach the reading and writing, the basics to get to that next step.
Yeah,
folks, I love John's idea of like the Instagram. I mean, that's how you're going to connect with a lot of these folks. But beyond that, I mean, there's a technology aspect to it. So when it gets to kind of that next step of I propose in our document, we got to figure out like what's the cost of it. Figure out, all right, well, we got to get a phone and internet to all of these folks so they can actually go through the A, B, and C to learn. And there's certain prerequisites to move to the next step. I mean, if it's not attainable to even get transportation, which is a big deal in Detroit, you're screwed. You're stuck in your neighborhood. You're never going to leave, and you're done. So I mean, there's certain kind of barriers even before kind of being that type A driver, which I completely agree and respect. But we need to try and figure out, there's some people that are stuck, even before the starting block.
Let's get some possibilities how to lessen the stigma in our communications. You can think about that however you would want to. And what I want to give you as stimulus is think of any communications challenge that is really tricky, and how do you overcome it? So for example, this is a weird one, but in direct-to-consumer pharma advertising, you used to have the voice of God do all the disclaimer stuff like, side effects may include losing your left ear, having a marriage end, sacrificing your second-born child. And what they found is they always knew that was just a huge problem, because you have this great promise of this great new therapy, that's going to change your life. And then the side effects sound worse than the malady itself. But what they found is by bringing a doctor in, and not just this disembodied voice of God reciting that while, lovely landscapes were going by on the visual, having a doctor actually talk through that gave it a credibility and really lessened the impact of essentially the stigma that could be attached to that. So by finding a credible, and not just doctors, but doctors obviously with great bedside manner that were both competent and cared, it was really much easier to get past over the toughest parts of the communications. That's just one weird example, but I want you to think of any other examples where someone has found a really great way of lessening the impact of tough communication, or just really working around it in some other way.
One thing is this is a choice of language. And one of the things we've had a conversation with my Three Stone group is, you know, I'm the guy that holds the vision, and I bring the projects forward. You know, my job is to create projects that pay, so that I'm already a year out on working on this. But the thing I keep telling all my guys, because, you know, all these guys are professionals. It's mostly 2 to 5 man shops. They're all in their 30s to 55, 35 to 55. What I keep telling them, my view as a kind of a futurist, is I believe skilled tradesmen, whether you're a lineman, electrician, plumber, blacksmith, sculptor, whatever, is we are going to be the new upper class, or new, I shouldn't say upper class, middle class. I believe that we have a certain level of security in our economic future because we're unique. We have certain skill sets that are indispensable and desirable by the upper, you know, this upper tier of wealth that's being kind of pushed into this 1% who are going to spend it. These people will spend it. I've been around them enough. They will spend it if you give them a reason to spend it. Yeah. And the thing is then you can have spillover effect into other projects, into public works projects. So the language, the stigma I kind of diminished with them, and I'm telling my new guys, is our future is secure as long as we adapt, innovate, and push our skill sets constantly. We have to be on our toes, but we do not have to struggle. I mean, that's my experience.
So what I like about making the distinction of the skilled trades is that in the impending job apocalypse, anything that can be automated is going to be automated. And so the more you can kind of speak to this path being a more sure path to avoid the, you know, kind of the ravages of automation, then I think that really gets interesting. And yeah, I mean, there are just certain things we're going to continue to need as humans that it's going to be a while before AI and robotics can fully do the job as well as skilled practitioners.
You know, one thing,
on the meat
one of the stigma I keep seeing is it's young people's view on craftsmen and tradesmen. Anybody in the trades are kind of old fat dudes.
Well, again, so that's old way, new way, right?
Yeah. So one thing I found is on Instagram. I mean, there's some amazing craftsmen out there who have their own kind of cult of personality. They've got their own style, and they're really owning their trade and craft. And I think to kind of use these social media platforms with young people and show, like, you don't have to, have plumber's crack. You could be you could be a plumber who has, whatever, you dress hip hop and you have a cool van and you can create your brand after you go through all the hard work, and you have to have the long view. So I think a lot of it is perception and image.
Well, and also even within plumbing or within any given trade, taking the John Aguilar approach and going, what is the very top tier of that trade look like, feel like, do differently? And again, back to your point, John, about being very precise about the language you're using. This now isn't just masonry. This is now stonesmithing. And it's just a very different thing. And creativity is a very real part of it. And so, yeah, making that case a little bit stronger.
Well, and I think to build off of that, and to Derek's point, right, obviously we want to reach the people who are struggling the most economically and the most cut off from these opportunities. And, what we know from the science is that, we blindly copy role models that look like us. So yeah. I think that, part of what we can do is, clearly there are people who have made it out of those neighborhoods who have had some success, right? So if you take, literally the only neighborhood that I know that's in the hood in Detroit is Jefferson Chalmers, because that's where I stayed when I was out there for the Detroit Economic Club. But if you find, like, in the existing trades, you go around, you find who are all the guys in the existing trades who grew up in Jefferson Chalmers. And then you just get their stories on video in short 1-minute clips or something that you can then put on social media, so that if you then are already drawing on the people who are already there, suddenly now there's visibility, and suddenly you're like, oh shit, look, that guy made it out. he looks like me, he talks like me, he grew up like me, and now he has like a nice house and he has a good life and all of that sort of stuff. That could be me. So I think part of it is
this is doable. Yeah. This is doable,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
This is Hunter's idea, but if somehow we could get folks the prerequisite skills in high school or otherwise, like, hey, you can make some money and like an Uber type app, like, hey, go help so and so on, or all of a sudden there's project, and all of a sudden these kids are instead of making $10 an hour, they're making $20 an hour, and their summers off. That's real. I mean, Uber and Airbnb didn't grow to be what they the IPOs that they were without that being a main component of it.
So much of this is that also that enables people to dip their toes into the trades, because I think that's the other thing too is that people, like, if you look at increasingly the way that the sort of the millennial experience is that you get to try a lot of things out. So somebody like Drew Sample, right, like he might do some Ubering or some lifting. He delivers stuff for Amazon Fresh. He does this, he does that. And then ultimately, like, if he could experience the trades and then, he sort of catches the bug of, like, say, being an electrician or being a carpenter, then he's like, okay, it's time to get serious about this. And then he, like, works his way up the ranks. So I think that's the other thing, too, is even just building off of that, right? There are all these maker spaces that exist all around the country. And there are a lot of people who are sort of trying these things out. And that's the sort of community, to Jeremiah's point, that is potentially already engaged enough and already sort of has taken the first few steps down the path to Ikigai. And maybe that's like a really ripe ground for starting to move people further down that.
We have a career readiness academy through the Trade Economic Club where we mentor sophomores and juniors, and we do a bunch of different things. But one thing we do is help them with career exploration. Economic trend, like, here's what it costs to enter these different fields, here's what you can potentially make. And it's just amazing seeing these, 9th and 10th or 10th and 11th graders' eyes light up and say, you mean I can make $60,000, $70,000, when I'm 23, 24 and not be in debt? I mean, that's a huge way to help eliminate the stigma, just by, like, simple dollars in a sentence.
I was going to say to what Derek just said, that's great to get them interested, but that's never enough to get them to actually take any steps towards the skilled trade. As a journeyman lineman, you can make anywhere between $130,000 to $300,000 a year. It's a great trade, depends how much you want to work. I've shared this with numerous amounts of people, how much money that you could possibly make. And I've gotten, after that, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much money you can make. What can I do? And I give them steps, and I tell them, okay, get your CDL Class A and call me. I've given them my number. I said, if you have any questions about taking the test for the CDL, nothing. I never, did you take, and then I'll call them, I'll text them. Did you take that test?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, Jeremiah, is that that great news up front is exciting and everything, but it's still not getting them over hurdles. So how can we couple that aha moment then immediately with something else? So I think you almost maybe you need to kind of stack the communication. So now there's, wow, I didn't know you could make that much. And then I hear, I have another touch point that moves me a little bit closer. And then I have a third touch point that moves me closer. We know that just from, from the research that you often need to hear something like 6 or 7 times before it actually works into your active memory, into your active awareness. And so maybe overly relying just on that one opening gambit just isn't going to be nearly good enough. So I think that's great. So Jeremiah, if you can think of anything that you could then stack with that great news, like, after hearing that, second, the third, the fourth message then, that because I already demonstrated some interest, just let's help them move on by hitting them with, a handful of more kind of reframing messages.
Yeah, I think something that from tutoring is that, the basic problem is that you can't change the culture of an individual. You really have to change the culture of the entire surrounding community. And so part of it is that, you know, you can create little micro clusters where, you know, if you like in the context of a family, right? Like you've got some parent who wants the kid to do well in school, you know, you're then brought in, and essentially currently the parent is the crazy person because they're saying, you know, you should try in school, you should study, you should do your homework. And then a lot of what I've realized, and I think part of what makes me more and more effective is that I'm working with the kid, but really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find, you know, change agents so that you can flip the family until the kid is the crazy one. It's counterinsurgency. And once the kid is the crazy one, then social pressure kicks in and they flip because now belonging requires them to behave differently. So obviously, like if we're talking about changing an entire neighborhood in, you know, Detroit or wherever it is, that's very difficult. But I think if you can, you know, if it rather than it becoming sort of like I'm trying to change this individual, like you find, you know, so you find, say, in the neighborhood, you find 4 individuals who are game for this or are up for this. You then bind them together into a group.
Yeah.
And now you 4 people that we've skimmed out of this community are a group, and we're constantly so you guys are all holding each other accountable. So now it's like, oh fuck, these 3 guys, they're all going to go get their CDL license. Fuck, if I don't go, I'm gonna look like an asshole. And then they show up to my house, they pick me up, they drive me out. This is what Drew Sample did with the Columbus thing. He was like, I'm gonna come all the way to fucking Detroit and drive you out to Columbus. And at that point, what do I say? Am I like, no, Drew, I'm not getting in the car with you while you drive and podcast? No, even though I thought I was taking my life in my hands, like social pressure becomes such that you're like, oh, fuck, I guess I'm going.
I was in the Marine Corps. And so one thing, it really has, I got out in 92, but it's still the same. I still stay in touch. I meet young Marines and, you know, a lot of guys go in there for all kinds, but the one thing that's unique about the Marine Corps is you go in and you want a sense of purpose because all young men, I have 4 kids, 12, 16, 20, 24, grandkid, and I work with young people. So I'm around young people a lot. And my boys are teens, and I have a 24-year-old son. I have a nephew that's worked for me for 6 years. So I love young men especially. And the one thing is I teach them, and that I feel like I learned is we have to find our sense of purpose, and what I feel we're best at as men is serving or creating or doing both. And if we can find a way to serve humanity, I mean, I literally mean that, and it could be through the military. It could be in so many different ways, but we really, in the end, women, females have a natural built-in purpose, which is the possibility to nurture and create, or nurture and, birth, bring into being, and then nurture into being. That's a given. We have to find ours, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a while. But one thing I learned in the Marine Corps that I thought was great is they are fantastic at creating an ethos and a sense of purpose. And so when I look at that circle, I'm thinking what the world needs. I kind of feel right now that young men, everyone has short attention spans. All my guys want to work projects. So I just kind of adapt to their method for right now, which is they want to work a 6-month project, save enough money to go off and do something, come back. So I'm kind of using Instagram, Facebook, project by project orientation, investing in them in between. But the one thing I'm emphasizing to them is what the purpose is of what we're doing and why we're serving, which is beauty. We're in the business, my guys are in the business of building beauty that lasts for hundreds and hundreds of years through stone. And I think what the world needs, especially for young men, and young women too, but especially, is they've got to have a sense of purpose that outstrips money and outstrips their ego. And it's something they can really dive into. And I feel like when you look at 2025 in the trades versus the 80s, I'm going back to that thing. It's really giving them purpose that drives them, wakes them up, and gets them over this inertia that Jeremiah sees. I've experienced this issue with these guys too, is they've got to have something Because truthfully, when you're on my projects and you're working 55 hours a week, we're just kicking ass and it's hard. It's not that they're earning $25, $28 an hour. That's not enough for that. It's what's the purpose of that day's feature. And that's what keeps these guys going until 6 o'clock at night, because we're on deadlines. And I tell them, you got to create $1 million detail, no shortcuts, something that's never been done before. We've got to exceed our standard of yesterday. And they really jump into that. And that's what motivates them.
3 workers. You go up to the first worker, you ask him what he's doing, and he's just kind of, it's kind of just hem-hawing. He says, I'm busting up rocks. And you go, okay, well, that's super motivating. You go to the second worker, and he looks like he's got a little more energy, little more direction. He's not quite as, just kind of hangdog in his appearance. You ask him what he's doing. He says, I'm constructing something using rock. I can't remember the details here. But then you go to the third one, and you see this guy is totally on point. There's energy in his movement. There's a smile on his face, and you ask him, what are you doing? And he says, I'm building a cathedral. And they're all doing the very same thing. The last guy, though, because he has connected to the power of purpose, really gets it. And he has that longer picture. He has that bigger frame. And the market for something to believe in is infinite. And I think that's one of the key things we're talking about here, how to really help people understand that this really is something that the world needs, and not to have that just be, spin, but actually doing the work as the, in John's case, the employer, or those of us trying to help, kind of create the story here. What is that bigger thing that it really can latch on to? And now it's not just muscles engaged, but it's heart, it's emotion, it's the whole person. Thinking again of the journalist questions, now see if we can use different who with some specificity. It could be more of the details, what's in their background, what's their attitude, whatever that is. But then come up with possibilities that bring in 3 or more of the other things. So now for this particular target, and I'll give you an example, here's the how we reach that person, here's what the message is, or here's when we go after them, whatever that is. Just high school sophomores and juniors, but high school sophomores and juniors who've demonstrated kinesthetic learning preference. I just am aware that there are the 3, learning types: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I know that some people really do prefer to learn much more by doing than by hearing or seeing. I'm just wondering if they're maybe a good audience for it. We don't have to argue this now. It's just another possibility. But if it were them, the kinesthetic learners, you connect to them through maker spaces. If you're still in a school district where there still is a shop class, how do you actually get time? I know most teachers, I've been asked several times to come present to kids in as our kids were growing up here. Most teachers like when people come in to present. Maybe there's an opportunity to come in the shop class and do that. So pull together some thoughts on a very specific target. Again, get as granular as you can so we can start playing with this. We want to come up with lots of ideas on that, but then flesh it out with at least 2 or 3 of the other what, when, where, why, and how.
The target I would have is the not-for-profit arena. I do a lot of work with, as I mentioned before, United Way, and as I have to be them because people have their own preconceived notions about United Ways in their area, but they are focusing on childhood, early development, high schools, and then kind of, the folks that we spoke about that are kind of post-educational system. They're oftentimes just looking for the means to make something happen. So if we provide the means and provide a coordinated effort, so kind of for the who and what, I mean, the who would be them being kind of the community leader. of saying, all right, hey, let's develop these tribes of 4 to 5 people, within each block. Have United Way be the center for that, because they're already reaching out to them for, again, I'm just using United Way. It doesn't have to be them, but insert charity here. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to accomplish, and here's the means. The what is here, and where the what, where the means to make it happen. So,
I love it. Can you think of any other how in terms of like specific communications media or anything else on the how, the when, the where? You already have a little bit of the where already.
Yeah, the how. From a media standpoint, it'll follow itself. We can get a YouTube video going like this and get, the right folks get to go viral. We have enough people connected to the great Emperor Brian Callen, or if you say his name 3 times, will he appear? Is that how it works, or what?
Yeah, actually, that is how it works. His ears are always pricked to somebody talking about him. So already you've said it once. Just be careful about saying it 2 more times, because if he appears, this conversation will only be about his physique, his tennis, and his love of fine cheeses.
That's right. That's right.
What I would add to that, though, and we do have, Hunter's met him some different private equity groups that I'm sure you guys are connected to. We're connected here in Detroit to the folks that are, on that kind of, top 100 wealthiest people in the world list. So, if we get the right what, I really think we have the right connectivity to make the rest happen. We just got to find, what that what is to, move forward. So
this is based on my experience so far. I got a call a month ago from a Tokyo-based art company. I'm flying up next week to talk to them about some secret stone project to build somewhere in the world via Instagram. I asked them how. So, and I'm not saying that for my own sake. What I'm saying is I've had this weird success with Instagram. I resisted it. I went for it. I dove in. My daughter taught me how to do it. And that's how I did it. Literally a 58-second video on job opportunities, uploaded it to Facebook. I got probably 24 hits off that from Australia, Canada, US. And out of that, I pulled 12 guys. I still have guys that call me, and I set up 45-minute calls with them. I connect with them. So I'm doing this kind of thing. I'm definitely agree with Hunter. We have to think of this as one-on-one missionary work. That is, you cannot bring my wife's work into this. Feisty, Face It, Evolution, Smarter Than You. We cannot get past the power of oxytocin. Oxytocin comes from I tell people, in the end, I'm in the business of creating oxytocin. I want people to gather around my fire features, and they have to connect shoulder to shoulder. And we literally, everything we build is generally around a circular fire feature. Whether it's $4 million or 45. The reason why I'm saying that is, in the end, we can't outmaneuver biology. Our biology craves connection. So here's who, in general, it's young people. That's where the potential and the energy is, right? And teens. You can't, that's just a set audience. And then the win, there's no win on this thing. It's as fast as possible because this stuff exists, work exists right now.
I understand. Well, let me ask you, John, on that point. Is there a when for the young person? It's more likely that they're going to be responsive. Is there something going on in their life? Is there something that's just been going on for them? Is there anything like that? That's so the when for them.
So my experience with Mike, so my boys have to be on every one of my job site. We have a really loose homeschooling program. Hunter's kind of aware of what we do, and pretty much what we don't do is really what it is. So my boys have been on my job sites doing stuff for the last 3 years. They have to come to every job site, and they have to work a certain amount of time. So one started when he was 10, so they've been on there. And now the 12-year-old did 6 months last year of apprenticeship with the blacksmith shop, decided he doesn't want to do it. Now we're trying to get him into a local sewing. It's a company that makes hoodies. My 16-year-old started last year for 6 months, is now on a 6-hour-a-week apprenticeship with the blacksmiths. And looks like they're going to offer him a paid position if he sticks with it when he turns 17 next year. And they also still have to come to my job. So I think at different levels you expose to the young kids. you introduce very loose drop in the shop type stuff to the teens, or something more formal in the summer when they can do that. And then with the kind of 18 to 22-year-old group, you're offering something that is more secure. So I think each of those, the younger you tap them, the better, because you kindle interest. And what what my boys respond to is connectivity with these guys. So the why is, all of them are craving purpose, but they're also craving human-to-human connection, right? So the how. So one of the things I thought of yesterday was Instagram is a huge platform for craftsmen, amazing leather workers. I mean, I'm astonished the talent that's in America today by people that were in relative obscurity. So my thought is things go from west to east. So what if LA created this kind of zeitgeist, and you created an Instagram live, you get Instagram involved with Facebook, because this is how we've driven our business, my business, get them to kind of fund this. But basically you bring in a select group of craftsmen and women from all kinds of stuff, linemen to leather makers to female welders, and you have this really tight group. It's like a congress of how to engage young people into the 21st century. And it's more of a it's more of an in-house group. It's on a live video feed, and it's really promoted, but it's kind of bringing a hip LA style celebrity thing, but the message has to stay firm, which is engage and invest in young people. And then from there, this other idea I had was go to, like Derek talks about, you got to go there. So one of the things I've been thinking about for years is bringing a stone boot camp into the inner cities in the summer. And it's not so much like they're going to become dry stone masons. It's more about exposure to what it's like to work and be dedicated to something for 2 weeks that you have to start and finish.
Yeah.
So it could be like basic skills in the inner city boot camps, because there's this gap that all the guys I know in the trades, if you don't come in with, you don't know how to read a tape measure, you understand what a grinder is, or you can't understand different gauge wire, time to teach you because they're so busy. So there's a gap that has to be jumped for them to be even entry level.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I agree with Derek. You got to go there. And this requires a little bit of logistics, right? And then the last thing is, I talked to Hunter about this in the summer, is I think of Craigslist, but for craftsmen and contractors only. They're vetted, it's monetized, they post their work up there, and they have to be vetted to follow kind of an ethos. And then young people who kind of gotten into this whole circle and swirl, they can go on there and see real actual things. And that's all it is just think of Craigslist for craftsmen and contractors, top down, bottom up.
My father, who is in the Middle East, he said that movements aren't built out of nothing; they're built by cannibalizing other movements. And so, obviously, so much of the focus of this, and the Scottish Tran video that we were going to play at the beginning, is about the fact that there is a global phenomenon going on where there are groups like ISIS and the alt-right who have, promised a false path to Ikigai. And I think that if we explicitly say that NISIS is the competition of the Bloods, the Crips, MS-13, ISIS, and the alt-right, and that we are going to steal followers from them, and that we want tradesmen to come in and teach those skills and help people come on board. We want teachers to come teach them the basic reading, writing skills to get them on that path. We want Uber and Lyft to provide rides to these people so they can get where they need to go, so that they can get the training that they need. And we want, tool companies like Makita to provide them with the tools so that they can actually pursue these jobs. And then we want contractors to help them with all of this. But that becomes a really, really compelling vision where there's lots and lots of people who can get involved. And I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of putting the Bloods, the Crips, MS-13, ISIS, and the alt-right out of business? I do. So, I mean, I think that's the thing. I think that's building that marketing and building that position and being serious about doing that, and then, doing whatever version of that we can at whatever level we can, and then just growing and growing and growing that out. I think that's pretty compelling.
I love that. I love the energy. I love the kind of the impudence of it.
The craftsman's caliphate.
There we are.
Exactly.
The
How good will a caliphate built entirely by craftsmen be? I mean, it'll be done to like such high standards.
That's fantastic. All right. Does anyone else have a who coupled with a what, when, how, why, anything else? Any
I
other?
wanna touch on
Yeah, please.
the who being also the parents. Not every parent is someone like
Nice.
John who is forced. I don't necessarily want to say forced, but encouraging strongly to get them kids into these trades and expose them to these things. I know growing up for myself, my dad was a skilled tradesman, but he was always telling me I want better for you. I want you to go to college. We had that stigma of going to college was how you become better. And I did that. I didn't like it. So if we can reach out to parents and get them to realize that college isn't always the best thing or the betterment of society, whatever.
Yeah.
That we can reach them, because obviously that's where the message is coming from to the kids. So
That's great.
Who, and that's just what I wanted to add.
Jeremiah is really correct.
Oh, go ahead.
He hit such a key point, because we homeschool, and a lot of people just question what we do and why we do it. And what I found is parents are driven. Oh my God, they're driven so much by fear, because biologically they want the best for their kids, but they're adhering to this old stigma that if you don't go to school, you're screwed. And it's fear-based. It has to be a counter narrative. And Jeremiah is right, because if you decide as a parent you're not going to buy this false message, well, guess what? You have to invest. It means you have to drive them to an apprenticeship, find the apprentice, the program. You have to invest time and energy, driving, etc. And sometimes some parents aren't willing to do that unless the motivation is so great. And so I think Jeremiah hit a huge who on this one.
I think it's really fair to in this kind of outreach to parents is to help them understand that again, it's back to old way, new way. And the old way, where college was the kind of panacea for bloody everyone, irrespective of what was kind of true about the kid in question. Now we understand better that I think it's fair just to ask, and that approach necessarily going to be the most sure path toward Ikigai for everyone. And of course, we know the answer is no. And so actually being seen as a resource maybe to help parents be choosier in that, and even exposing parents to the idea that what they want really ultimately for their kids is for them to get on this path to Ikigai. For some kids that will be college, but for a lot of kids that won't. And so just kind of pulling together that case, here's what you really want for your kids. You want them to be happy. You want them to make a difference. You want them to contribute. Here's what's been happening with the college route. Think about that a little bit more.
Adam, here's one more how, if you don't.
Yeah, please.
Okay, if you're okay with it. So I've talked to Hunter about this before, and I talked to you about this. We're going to form a media group, and it's just a big term for an in-house thing, which is basically because we've been asked a lot by reality shows about they want to do stuff about stone, but it never fits their formula. It's not going to work. And so, but one thing I thought of is we're looking into this thing about long form shows like Chef's Table, which is on Netflix, which is diving deep into the depths of who the chef is, what drives them, and their failures and successes, etc. It's a fantastic long form show. It's super popular. Everybody loves it. It's not fast. It's not fake. It's real. It's in depth. So I've got a couple people looking into this now, and I thought this would be a great collaboration with MMA, which is maybe to use the YouTube platform and create a long form show on craftsmen in the trades. So linemen, electricians, but it's what it is, a 45-minute, 50-minute, but it's really getting into the human background of these guys. The guys in my group have incredible stories. And, you know, they're, like I said, they're 35 to 54. They're all superhuman, amazing guys with amazing backgrounds, amazing human stories you could really connect to. And then every guy in my group, I would say, is on their path to Ikigai now that I know what it is. And so
that's great.
There's a way for parents could watch that with their kids. And then you get that all connected to all these other platforms that are formed. All of a sudden, you let this media platform tell the story, and they can watch it together or separately. So that's something that we're working on right now.
Oh, that's great. I love that idea of media that reaches the parents and the kids.
We're going to be launching a Straight A Conspiracy podcast and redoing the Straight A Conspiracy website. And so we're going to, I think, you know, pull in a lot of parents, and because a lot of parents don't know about the job apocalypse, they don't really know what's coming down the pike, and they don't understand. They still, you know, parents are shopping on the wrong criteria. They're shopping based on resources. They're focused on, does my school have an Olympic-sized swimming pool and a football team and whatever else, rather than, wait, is this school teaching my kids to learn, unlearn, relearn, to teach themselves from all the resources available? So I think part of what we can do is, as part of the Straight A Conspiracy effort, we can also be, you know, helping parents unlearn all the old intuitions about where Ikigai is and helping them, you know, find their way to all these other resources. I'm talking about the School Sucks show right now. So Brett Venot is obviously a lot of what he's been doing. And so actually the School Sucks community is so ripe for all of this. And we can probably partner with them both to be getting people in that community and in the homeschool community more generally into the trades, and then also to be shaping and remaking content that is helping people even know about this. So that's a really, really natural, easy partnership.
Well, and as it's come out in this session, I think there's the path to the trades, and I think we're really talking about the smarter path to the trades, because now we're considering Ikigai and the full implications of that. And so, like, again, I keep coming back to what John's doing. It's the difference between what John's doing and regular, the regular kind of commoditized masonry path. I mean, there's just such a night and day difference there. And so what's the smarter approach to being an electrician? What's the smarter approach to the trade that I grew up in? You know, ceilings and, you know, sheetrock and insulation and demountable partitions and all that. How do you avoid being down at the lower end of all those? Even those do require learning and everything, there's still the higher end within each of those where more value is added, where more creativity is engaged. And, you know, I think dangling something like that out there as really reframing what a trade can be, I think is going to be really helpful.
There's so much more need for a linesman than there is for a stonesmith, right? I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, Jeremiah. But one thing, as you were just talking about, Adam, that one of the things I really begin to understand, because I'm always trying to probe the depths of the psychology of young people. And again, I learned a lot in the Marine Corps. And then later I went into the Army. You talk about two distinctive cultures. It was a mess. And the thing I learned in the Marine Corps is they train you extremely well. They give you high standards, a super high expectation, and then they release you as a 22-year-old Lance Corporal, and they say, go get it done, and don't come back, don't give us an excuse, right? And you know, and what I learned is you then want to push yourself to that highest level expectation. You don't have to have everything all perfect and all the right tools or whatever. You want to succeed at it because that was what's laid out for you. That's your purpose. And then when I went in the Army later, and that was a long story why, is like Boy Scouts compared to, you know, you had what I call, like, you had senior NCOs, E6s, which is like a staff sergeant doing what the Marine Corps let 22-year-old Lance Corporals do, with full trust. And they kind of teach you and then they walk away. And then when they come back, you better have it done. And so one thing I started doing at my job sites, giving each guy his own place, his own space, his own job. Like he owns that. So
that's great.
My second year apprentice became my master cutter this year. He cut for 6 months. His stone cutting station was his. When I entered into his station, which was a space, I asked him, what do you need? What do you want from me? And I'm running this multi-million-dollar project. What I learned is when you give him a sense of ownership, and you have to do that. It's a manipulation. It's a psychological manipulation. In this case, it was the actual space. When I entered that, I asked him how I could serve him that day. What tools does he need? The other guy became my guy that created all my base work for the stone. So when I came to his space, I said, hey, what do you need from me? If they said, I need this tool, I said, Roger that. I'll be back in an hour. And so my job was mainly to pick up trash, and I mean that literally. Because
you were running interference for them, and that's what that's what a good leader does. Absolutely.
And they learned, and their space was their space. They owned it. They stepped up to it, etc. So my question to Jeremiah is like, what's his thoughts on how do you get past this inertia? When he gives when you see a potential earnings of 130 to 300 after going through the getting up to journeyman, what is he seeing as this resistance from getting your CDL?
I think a big form of it is a lot of guys are scared to try and fail. And I feel like we have a huge stigma in this country of people being failures, and you're not allowed to be a failure. Nobody should be a failure. And I think it should be okay if you try out this trade and it's not for you and you're not good at it or you don't like it and you failed at it. It shouldn't be such a negative for someone. And partially in my trade in particular too, though, we deal with two things that a lot of people are scared of, which is heights and electricity. So a lot of people don't like heights and a lot of people don't like electricity, and you combine the two and you have to add that to the mix.
I've been bit by both multiple times.
Sounds like a great ride at Universal. Right. The Tower of Electrified Terror or something. The other thing too, as well, in terms of also reframing the trades, is that and John, this is something that John talked about before we did our podcast with Brian. He was saying that too little is expected of young people. And I think that's a big problem with education is that it's like you're constantly trying to baby them, constantly trying to spoon feed them, and therefore there's no challenge. Nothing is being demanded of you. And I think part of the appeal of the trades is like, listen, to be up on that pole at that height and dealing with 13,000 volts, you got to really know what you're doing and you got to be really good at it. So I think that in some sense, like, we want to make the path to Ikigai accessible, but at the same time, there is some sort of storytelling around the fact that you have to it's very much like the sort of the old Japanese thing, right? Like if you guys have ever seen Jiro Dreams of Sushi, like they have to spend years working on rice before they're even allowed to touch eggs, right? And that it seems to me like there's so much of that in the trades, like. Yeah, okay, kid. Like, it's great. One day you want to be able to go up that pole and handle 13,000 feet, 13,000 volts, but you're going to have to, like, really earn your stripes, really get very good before you're entrusted with that level of responsibility.
I think Hunter hit on a point that maybe part of this process, I don't know what your theme was, is flip this thing on its head. Quit dumbing every freaking thing down. Like my apprentice, Gillen, on his first year last year, for 6 months on the Moongate project, all he did was tool stone. We call it the beat suite. It was this little tent, and he had to stand there and just take the high points off stone for 5.5 months. That's all he did. I wanted to wear him out. And the dude did stellar work. And I mean, he's now my lead guy. But, I also gave him a standard. So I really think that actually what we need to do is not dumb down. We need to raise the standard so high that there's a incredible desire, and I actually think it might be this what do you call it at the beginning where you twist? Is that thing you're talking about? You know, you're saying like twist this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. Now, you know, having lived in Israel, I went to school with these guys. This guy wrote this book. You guys should.
Oh, that's an amazing
Startup
book.
Nation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I went to school with Dan Senor. Everybody should read this.
Oh, Dan's great. Yeah.
So I went to school with him. Now, this is great because what do? They invest in their young people and they expect failure. That's why they're called the Startup Nation. So you're talking about Jeremiah said, you know,
and the point that I want to make is that, you know, I have global clients, and the feedback I get from across the globe is that they expect America is, you know, our culture is the culture that allows best for failure and for taking on stuff. I asked a Brit client once, you know, I told him, I said, you know, Mike, we hear your British accent and we automatically assign you another 20 to 25 IQ points because we're still in a thrall to our, you know, to our colonial overlords. And he laughed and he said, I get that. I've heard that a lot. He said, but what you've probably never heard is how you Americans intimidate us. And I said, no, what is that? And he said, I'll be in a meeting with my bloody American colleagues and someone will suggest something kind of wild, something kind of out there. And it's always the Americans who go, sure, I'll do that. And everyone else goes, you're crazy. What are you doing? You're sticking your neck out there. You know, it's the tall poppy syndrome. You know, you don't want to be standing above the crowd. You get your head cut off. And he said there is a sweet naivete about Americans still that most other people in the world find, they envy it. They think it's a little crazy. But that's kind of, they see that as being one of the distinguishing features of, you know, what really brought us to the party. So I would really love to support that. That's still how we're viewed often. When I hear signs that we're losing that as a culture, that really concerns me because the world needs us to be the sweetly naive risk takers. And just because the negativity, as we note, is really, that's a bias. It's rooted in primal, experience that just isn't really fit for our conditions now. So anyhow, that's let's get back. Let's make risk cool again. You know, it's smart risk. It's not just totally heedless stupidity, but errors of omission should freak us out more than errors of commission.
The Brits, you know, in my experience, still condescendingly refer to America as the American experiment, as if the results aren't in. And in some senses, they're not. You know, I mean,
and I think that's great. I mean, let's keep the experiment going. That's the whole idea.
And I think the great thing is, you know, the amazing thing, you know, and I think what's been so cool about this whole mixed metal arts process, and, you know, what ISIS and the alt-right get right is the fact that you no longer have to build a country out of people who are geographically co-located. So, you know, people who have enough cultural similarity, enough of the same values, who really want to be practical and really want to fix things, can band together, bring together their different skills, have idea sex, innovate, try solutions, see what works, and just keep on iterating and iterating. So I think in many senses, you know, the American experiment is what we're doing here. We're just doing it on a global scale and really pulled together from a coalition of the interested. If you want to do something about terrorism, this is it. Like, this is actually how you start to develop a real playbook that is a real solution to terrorism. And anybody who wants to help with that, there's room for any skill set. You know, if you are a tradesman, you can help pass on those trades. If you are, you know, involved with something like the United Way, you know, you can help reach out to those communities and we can help figure out what are the next steps. If you work for a company like Uber or Lyft, people need rides. if, you know, John is talking about the fact that a lot of these people can't even recognize what the tools are for the job, that's going to take graphic design work, and that's going to take video editing. And we need someone to video edit out the best clips of this to try and reach Mike Rowe. You can also just tweet Mike Rowe. So there are lots and lots and lots of ways to get involved, and humanity's problems are not going to be solved by some magical faraway person. It's going to have to be solved by humanity. And the opportunity, I think, you know, Adam talked earlier about sort of what is the grand vision? What is the cathedral? The cathedral is that we finally have the opportunity to build a world worthy of our children. And I think that, you know, that is the great project of our age.